Hi class, right now we're going to be taking notes on angle relationships. So in this figure above, lines M and N are parallel to one another and are intersecting by a line called a transversal. When this happens, special angles are made. And this line being highlighted is the transversal. So make sure you are filling in the blanks on your notes packet. So we have adjacent angles, which are angles that are next to each other. They share a common side. These angles are supplementary, which means the sum of these two angles is equal to 180 degrees. So some examples are angles 1 and 2. They're right next to each other, and they form a straight line, so they have to equal 180 degrees. And angles 1 and 4 are also right next to each other and are supplementary. Can you name a pair of adjacent angles? Write it down, please. Alternate interior angles are interior angles that lie on opposite sides of the transversal. Their measures are equal. Examples are 4 and 6. Can you name the other pair of alternate interior angles? Next, we have alternate exterior angles, which are exterior angles that lie on opposite sides of the transversal. Their measures are also equal. So examples are 1 and 7. They're on the outside and they alternate. Can you name the other pair? Next, we have corresponding angles. These are angles that are in the same position or corner on the two lines in relation to the transversal. Their measures are equal to each other. So one example are angles 1 and 5. They're both in the top left corners. Then we have 4 and 8. They're on the bottom left corners. And if you highlight their angles, you could see 4 and 8 are both obtuse, so they'll be equal in measure. And 1 and 5 are both acute angles, and they're going to be equal in measure. Can you name another pair of corresponding angles? Then we have vertical angles. Angles that are opposite from each other. They share a common vertex. These angles are congruent, which means they are equal in measure. So one example of vertical angles are angles 2 and 4. They're right across from each other. Can you name another pair? Okay, in this example, if the measure of angle 1 is 75 degrees, find the measure of angle 3 and explain. Well, we know that angle 1 is 75 degrees, and 1 and 3 are called vertical angles. So we know vertical angles are congruent, so if angle 1 is 75 degrees, angle 3 is also going to be 75 degrees. They're going to have the same measure. So you could fill this in on your note packet. The measure of angle 3 is going to be 75 degrees because angles 1 and angle 3 are vertical angles, and that means they have the same measure. Remember, if you need to pause at any point, you could pause, you could rewind, you could go back and watch it later. Okay, in this example, if the measure of angle 12 is 60 degrees, find the measure of angle 13 and explain. Well, first look at 12 and 13. These angles are right next to each other. They're adjacent angles, and they're supplementary. They form a straight line. So we know a straight line has to add up to equal 180 degrees. So think about what you could do to find 13. we could subtract 180 minus 60. And you'll get 120 degrees. So we can say the measure of angle 13 is 120 degrees because angle 12 and angle 13 are supplementary angles, which means they have to add up to equal to 180 degrees. So again, you're filling this in on your notes packet. Okay, another example. If the measure of angle 10 is 125 degrees, find the measure of angle 14 and explain. Well, look at 10 and 14. They're both on the top left corners. So when they're in matching corners, they're corresponding angles. And corresponding angles have equal measures. So if 10 is 125 degrees, 14 is also 125 degrees. So the measure of angle 14 is 125 because angle 10 and angle 14 are corresponding angles, which means they have the same measure. Okay, if the measure of angle 5 is 118 degrees, find the measure of angle 4 and explain. Well, 5 and 4 are both exterior angles and they're alternating across the transversal. So they're alternate exterior angles and they have the same measure. So the measure of angle 4 is also 118 degrees since angles 4 and 5 are alternate exterior angles. Again, make sure you're writing as I'm writing on the board. Okay, if the measure of angle 25 is 48 degrees, find the measure of angle 26 and explain. Well, now 25 and 26 are alternating on the inside, so they're alternate interior angles and they have the same measure. So the measure of angle 26 is 48 degrees because angle 25 and angle 26 are alternate interior angles, which means they're congruent in their measures.